Bună dimineața și bine ați venit și revenit pe canalul nostru.
Bună dimineața!
Sunt cu Seba în
Oxford.
Haideți că o să întoarcem camera și o să vă arătăm unde suntem. Am luat un autobuz din Londra și a durat cam o oră și jumătate până, un pic mai mult, până am ajuns în centrul Oxfordului, unde o să ne plimbăm. Mergem la pas și sigur că o să vă arătăm și vouă. Chiar aici, în partea asta, este muzeul și biblioteca. Probabil una dintre. Și aici este primăria din Oxford. Agitație aici pe străzi, plin de autobuze. Este sâmbătă, ora cât dimineața? Cred că e în jur de 10 dimineața. Este 10 și un sfert și o să căutăm un loc unde să bem o cafea și să mâncăm ceva de dimineață. Afară sunt 4 grade, dar cafenelele sunt deschise, adică terasele. Vedeți, aici este doar o umbrelă mare deschisă și un mic geam jumătate pe lateral. Și lumea stă afară și își bea cafea. Am comandat și noi, se cheamă Art Cafe și chiar ne-a servit un domn care vorbea românește. Surpriză, nu-i prima oară. Unde ne-am mai întâlnit, Seba? La recepția hotelului. Da. Ne vorbea în română. Am comandat niște panini și clătite ca mic dejun pentru astăzi. Să vă arătăm și vouă când vin.
Da.
Eu mi-am luat un panini cu brânză de capră și ceva verdeață pe acolo, cred că spumă de spanac, clătită cu gem de căpșuni, dacă se văd prea bine. Așa sunt într-un cornet. Și Costin, ne pomenește Costin. Și Seba, pe de obicei Costin e în fața mea. Seba și-a luat un sandwich brazilian cu ceva bacon și brânză, nu?
Da.
Poftă bună!
Poftă bună!
Dacă veniți în Oxford, treceți și pe aici și vorbiți românește. Art Cafe, alături de Biserica Baptistă. A fost bun smoothie-ul? De care ți-ai luat? Cu căpșuni?
Da.
Asta este castelul Oxford. Seba s-a dus aici pe deal la castel și apoi vom face un tur al castelului și închisorii de aici. Avem rezervare pentru ora 11:20. Ne face poză de sus, Seba. Aici este gift shop-ul de la Castel. Putem să luăm și o armură dacă vrem. Isa ne-a dat instrucțiuni să-i luăm un hoodie, dar aici nu au decât pe maro și bleu marin. Și mai așteptăm să mai căutăm și în altă parte să vedem ce găsim. Și magneți. Magneți am găsit doar cu armură și am luat. Și acum Seba se uită să vadă dacă mai găsim și cu alt design. Aici avem o secție pentru copii și am luat și noi un tote bag din acela cu Oxford. Uite, aici ți-e construită din carton. Cărți pentru copii și nu numai. Uite, aici poate că sunt brelocuri și poate, uite, aici au magneți diferiți. Ia să vedem. Unul mai interesant. Da, și când ieșim eventual. Sau dacă găsim un rând mai mic. Și aici cutii cu 3,50 lire, atât a fost celălalt. Nu, 3, asta e mai ieftin înseamnă. Aici ne proiectează ceva, vezi? Înainte să înceapă turul.
This tower, and it is the oldest secular structure in Oxford. Back then, Oxford was called Oxenforda. It was a small Anglo-Saxon town that was having an awful lot of trouble with the Danes. So they put a wall around it when they got tired of having to rebuild the place after it had been razed. The wall has 4 gates, each with a defense tower. There is a north gate, a south gate, an east gate, and of course a west gate, which is how this tower comes into existence. It is the west gate. About 50 years ago, and then come 1066, William the Conqueror takes over, starts divvying up the land to reward those who've been loyal to him. Oxford goes to a baron named Robert D'Oyley. D'Oyley is very shrewd. He knows the best way to show the Anglo-Saxons who's boss is to force them to build him a castle, which is how Oxford Castle comes to be in 1071. This is a motte and bailey style castle. The bailey refers to everything within the castle walls where you go about your daily life. You have housing, a great hall, a church. You get the idea. It's like a town within the town. The bailey is the mound. Or sorry, the motte is the mound. Bailey is the inside of the castle, sorry. So that's that big hill you pass by on your way in. That is actually a man-made structure. When they were digging out the moat, the leftover earth was packed together to make that hill. And it is actually a very important part of the motte and bailey design. On top of the motte was a tower called the keep. The keep was the safest place in the entire castle. It is where the soldiers made their last stand if they had to. So they weren't just making them build that hill for fun, really important military structure. It was not natural. Castle is put here to incorporate a conveniently already built stone tower. Another key part of this castle is that the walls are 3 meters thick. You can have a look at them there where it's cut away. So it's excellent at keeping people out, but also very good at keeping people in. In 1216, we have our very first prisoners here. Any guesses who they were? Tourists? Locals will usually get this one because it is a scourge on Oxford to this day. It was none other than the drunk and rowdy students of Oxford University. Some things never change. Now, back then, students were 12 to 14 years old and required by law to be armed, so most have a sword, if not some other weapon. And you can imagine how delighted the townsfolk were to have drunk 14-year-olds running around with sharp blades. They solved this problem by throwing them in the castle dungeon until they were sober. This practice continues until 1531, when we officially become a prison. We remain a working prison until 1996, so fairly recently. Arguably in that long history, the worst time to be a prisoner here is the Victorian era. They bring in lots of reforms we're going to cover later, because this has been a weird enough intro without the actual intro bit. Have a look in there. In that room we had a capstan wheel. Story. King Henry I had no surviving legitimate sons. 24 illegitimate children, some of which are male, but he decides he wants to keep his true family line on the throne and is going to give it to his daughter, Matilda. However, this is the 1130s and people do not like this idea. The idea of a queen being in power is shocking. Nevertheless, Henry I is king and he can do what he wants, so yes, knights swear loyalty to his daughter Matilda. Unfortunately, when he passes, Matilda is away in France. Before she can get back here to claim the throne, her cousin Stephen steals it and becomes king himself. Matilda is, of course, furious, so she gathers all the knights who swore loyalty to her, as well as anyone else who saw her as the rightful heir, and raises an army. She attacks and begins a 14-year civil war called the Anarchy. In 1142, the fighting comes right here to Oxford. City falls in a single day, so Matilda's army has to retreat inside this castle. Stephen lays siege to it for 3 months, the last of which is December, so by then they are cold, nearly out of supplies, and if it weren't for what happened next, probably would have lost soon after. But one snowy night, Matilda had an idea. She dressed all in white from head to toe, had 3 of her most loyal knights do the same. Then they gathered any other white fabric they could find, mostly the bed sheets, tied a rope, took it, threw it out one of the windows, and climbed down into the snow, where they walked backwards. That way, their footprints would look like they were going to the tower instead of escaping it. That's very clever, and it works. Stephen finally takes this castle, only to discover Matilda is not here. War goes on 10 more years. Eventually it ends in a peace agreement. Under the agreement, Stephen remains king for the rest of his life, but upon his death, the throne goes to Matilda's son. He becomes King Henry II and is the beginning of the Plantagenet dynasty. They rule for nearly 300 years, so had there been no escape, history could have looked quite different. Now sadly, this is not the exact window she escaped from. It looks into the courtyard, which is not the direction you want to go in an escape. We believe she escaped from the window in the room just below us. Sadly, we do not go in there because it does not have a floor, but we believe it's that window because it's a similar size, it's lower to the ground, and it's facing a useful direction. We're quite certain it was this tower because we know they followed the river. And this tower had a water wheel attached, so it was, of course, the closest one. Is gone, aside from the crypt. The crypt is the basement of the church. Basically, when they blew up the chapel, the ruins hid the crypt, so no one knew it was still there, and no one knew it survived. It was lost for nearly 150 years, but eventually it was found, and it will be our next stop. But for now, please enjoy the view. Guys, climb a lot, and I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. I also think congratulations are in order. Those are no ordinary stairs. Those are called Norman trip steps, and they are designed to kill you. General idea being invaders rushing up when there's less people around, or if you just want to look around somewhere, read any of the signs that you'll see throughout, please feel free to do so. After the tour, you may return to any area which is not part of the tour. Alright, now, the crypt was built in 1074, 3 years after the rest of the castle. You might wonder why they waited. Well, Robert D'Oyley, the baron for whom all this was built, was not a religious man. Not even a very nice man. He had no interest in having a church in his castle until he had a dream. More of a nightmare. In it, the Virgin Mary appeared at the end of his bed, pointing to the ground. He believed this was a sign from God, that unless he changed his ways, he was going to go to hell. Now, he doesn't want to do either of those two things, so he finds a third option. Throws money at the problem, has church built, and arranges for the monks here to spend 1 hour each day praying for his soul for him. That way they should go to heaven. Even the oldest of its colleges by a century. It even had a celebrity teacher, Geoffrey of Monmouth. While he's teaching here, he writes...
Just let you know, there's a few people joining your tour. They were just a minute late, but they didn't miss much because you'd only gone up the steps.
13,
Whoops, wrong.
14, 15.
There we go, that's better. I know I need to have that on in case of emergencies, but good God, sometimes. Alright, so Geoffrey of Monmouth teaches here, writes the history of the kings of Britain, which is not accurate. It's more like myths and legends. There's giants in it. But, more significantly, there are characters in it we know to this day. Reason it looks modern is because it was still in use in the 1990s, so it did get some upgrades over the years, like glass for the windows. Worth noting that in the 20th century, we had 3 prisoners in each of these 2 cells. Worth contrasting with the Victorian era, when it was just 1. During the Victorian era, prisoners were kept in isolation because they were not allowed to talk. This is easy enough to enforce during their hard labor, but afterwards, well, we better make sure they don't have the opportunity to. So yeah, isolation for everyone. It's rather haunting. The only voice you're going to hear in your entire stay is the yelling of your prison guard. Enough on that though, people usually want to hear about this, so we're going to talk about this. To make it really come alive though, I'm going to tell you about Roland Jenks, a prisoner who was subject to one of these. Roland Jenks was a bookseller back in 1577. He was also a Catholic. Big problem because at the time, Queen Elizabeth I, a Protestant, was on the throne. And the 2 groups still really hated each other at this point. Jenks, for his part, starts using his bookselling as an opportunity to distribute pamphlets which criticized and insulted the Queen. Not a smart move. For this, he was arrested and found guilty of both sedition and the crime of having a foul and saucy mouth. No crime back then. For those crimes, he is sentenced to be pilloried by the ears for 3 days. Alright, I'm just going to lower this. I'm going to move your hood a little bit so I don't pinch you. Alright, you okay?
Yeah.
Comfy? Okay. Now, if you're Jenks, you're going to stay there for 72 hours, no breaks. You're also out in public, so people get to throw things at you. Favorites include rotten food, human waste, dead rats. Anything that's going to make a nice splat is allowed, though they do draw a line at rocks. If that makes you feel any better.
Yeah, it does.
Now, I'm going to let you go, because I think your friend got a picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Round of applause for our volunteer. Now that was just being pilloried. Being pilloried by the ears is worse. Tea parties, even luxuries, if they can afford them. If you were rich, it was like going to a hotel. Our richest ever prisoner was a woman named Mary Blandy. Her story's a little scandalous, so I'm just going to ask that we all brace ourselves, okay? Recall that we're all adults. All right? We're good? Okay. The year is 1751. Mary Blandy is nearly 30 and unmarried. Can you imagine? So her father starts to advertise her. And just anyone who will listen that his daughter is single and the lucky man who marries her will get £10,000. And as you can imagine, they are suddenly lining up to marry her. She does fall in love with one of her suitors. His name is William Cranston, captain in the British Army, son of Scottish lord. Good match. He proposes. She says yes. Wedding's planned. All the problems are about to be solved until her father makes a discovery. William Cranston is already married. He has a wife and 2 kids in Scotland. So, this wedding gets called off very quickly. Cranston is tossed out of the Blandy house, and Mary is left brokenhearted, forbidden from having anything to do with the only man she's ever loved again. If you ask me, though, her father has it far worse. In the coming months, he loses his hair, and then his teeth, and his eyes turn yellow. He dies. It's suspicious enough to prompt one of the very first autopsies in England, which reveals arsenic poisoning. Suspicion quickly falls on Mary because she has been seen putting white powder in her father's food. Yes, very subtle. An act she doesn't deny, but we'll get to her version later. First, she is hauled off to prison to await trial, and she stays even nicer than this. Doesn't even stay in a prison cell. She actually gets 2 private rooms out in the prison governor's manor. She also gets a personal maid in prison, so she has her hair done every day, clean clothes, tea parties, walks in the gardens whenever she likes, banquet at Christmas, you name it. Fabulous stay in prison. The only real restriction she faces is she has to wear fetters. We have one of her actual fetters right there in that case. It's kind of like handcuffs for your feet. You put the round part around the ankle and then use the bar part to attach to another one on the other ankle. Sadly, we don't have the other one because back then it was good luck to take things from people's corpses. To hang her really low where no one would be able to see that part of her. She also ordered a coffin so she could be laid out immediately with her modesty intact. There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
I can imagine.
Such a good prisoner. Okay, enjoy prison. Alright, if everyone wants to gather here in the middle of the room, you'll be able to see a board with 4 pictures on it. Those are 4 of the very first mugshots ever taken here. You can tell how old they are because of how people are sitting. Back then, most people don't know how to use a camera. It's new technology. So we have professional photographers taking the mugshots, and up here, and they start taking just the face. Over here, we have our youngest ever prisoner, Julia Ann Crumpling. She was just 7 years old. She was something, but that's not a particularly good source. And I know that her already spread it around. But I imagine there is some real life. We built special for him because we had no grade A security, and it was very unexpected when he was transferred here. They thought it'd be a good idea because there was a tunnel over to the courthouse, so he wouldn't have to go outside. Now we could protect the public. We just didn't have a cell appropriate for him because he's quite strong and ex-military. So his cell's built special. Video presentation inside. Feel free to enjoy that. When you're all done there in the old hospital wing, head out and you'll find the stairs. Immediately to the right of the stairs is the exit. People can never find it, but I promise you it's there. You can see the handle before you are off the stairs.
Am aici un timeline. Asta perete este timeline. Unul dintre colegii scria pe lateral Nuffield College. Și aici avem curtea interioară. Ia uitați ce frumos este. De ce grădini frumoase, cu iarba verde. Asta se vedea încă dinainte să aterizeze avionul. Verde, verde. Acum sunt 5 grade și este în jur de 12 și jumătate. O cruce cu tricolorul. Dar scrie în altă limbă. Cred că este tricolorul, că e și steagul Camerunului. Miroase bine aici. Da, peste o piață în aer liber. Se aude și muzică, că se găsesc și chestii de mâncat. Am venit cu Seba să identificăm de unde luăm la întoarcere autobuzul, că am coborât cu o stație mai devreme, cum ar fi. Și aici trebuie să ne întoarcem peste vreo 4 ore. Până atunci mai ne plimbăm și căutăm și un loc unde să mâncăm. Poate niște fish and chips, nu?
Vedem ce, da?
Da. Și încercăm ceva specific britanic, sper să aibă și locuri la Wig and Pan. Să tragi. Am renunțat pentru că, da, îl căutăm. Era foarte plin acolo. Seba a propus să căutăm puntea Suspinelor din Oxford și o să ne îndreptăm acolo. Cutie poștală. Deci de la 1263. Nu știu dacă avem voie să intrăm, dar la College Store. E curtea interioară a unui colegiu. Uită! Uită! Podul Suspinelor. Asta este, da.
E sigur?
Da. Păi da. Așa este, nu la Veneția e diferit.
Aici era, ziceam, o chiar...
Da, sediu. Să mergem mai aproape la podul Suspinelor. Am zis că mergem mai aproape aici, să facem niște poze. Ia înainte, Seba, fi ghid pentru restul zilei. Mai intrăm aici în lateral? Uite, acolo scrie în latină, școala de gramatică și istorie. Toate limbile pământului le auzim aici astăzi și la Londra, de fapt.
Aici este turn, nu știu ce este, dar... Mă pierzi pe străzi? Da. Și nu te bagi.
Păi să avem unghiul mai bun pentru filmare.
啊，點有咁搞北煲絲嘅反派。
Deci magazin de pălării și cape. Unde suntem, Seba?
Într-un
Pub englezesc. Și ce ai comandat?
De ce nu spui tu dacă
O să spun pe
un steak am comandat.
și fish and chips pentru mine și am remarcat că și căței au voie aici în pub. Și mai este unul, sau s-a ascuns aici. Seba a zis să mă filmez și pe mine, așa că iată-mă. Ambianță frumoasă de sâmbătă după amiază în Oxford. Eu mi-am comandat fish and chips cu piure de mazăre și un sos, iar Seba, era să zic iarăși Costin, are tot cartofi și are un steak și sos.
Da.
Și aici am mai luat am avut un suc cu sirop de soc, nu? Poftă bună, Seba!
Poftă bună!
Da! Seba și-a cumpărat un ginger ale și eu încă un suc de foc. Noroc! Să vă arătăm și la exterior Leul Roșu. Aici este pubul unde am luat prânzul și ca preț a fost cam 50 de lire ce am comandat. Un pic peste cu extra băuturile. În spate avem niște italieni care vorbesc non-stop. Când în engleză, când în italian. Acum cântă. Sau fi pentru tine, Isa. Asta a fost plimbarea noastră în Oxford. Acum suntem în autocarul ce ne va duce la Londra înapoi. Seba e aici lângă mine, e obosit. Amândoi suntem, mai ales eu, de fapt. Sperăm că v-a plăcut. Noi ne-am simțit foarte bine. E un autocar aglomerat, avem mulți italieni în spate. Până data viitoare vă spun la revedere. Ciao!